Earlier today, a federal grand jury returned an 18-count superseding indictment charging New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell and former New Orleans Police Department officer Jeffrey Paul Vappie II. They are charged with a series of fraud, obstruction of justice, and false statement offenses for their role in a nearly 3-year fraud scheme that we allege exploited their public authority and positions. The indictment alleges that in October of 2021, Mayor Cantrell and Jeffrey Vappie, a member of her executive protection team, developed a personal, intimate relationship. From that time until Mr. Vappie's retirement in June of 2024, they embarked on a scheme to defraud the City of New Orleans and the New Orleans Police Department. By exploiting Vappie's job and Cantrell's authority as mayor to have the city and the New Orleans Police Department pay Vappie's salary and expenses during the times that Vappie claimed to be on duty, but when he was actually engaged in personal activities, usually with Ms. Cantrell, but sometimes alone at the Pontalba apartment. The indictment further describes the many steps that Cantrell and Vappie took to hide their scheme and to perpetuate their continued fraud, including using a secure messaging platform, WhatsApp. Specifically, Cantrell and Vappie used the WhatsApp platform to exchange over 15,000 messages, pictures, and audio clips in an 8-month period. They also used WhatsApp to intimidate subordinates, to harass a citizen, to lie to colleagues and associates, to delete evidence, to make false statements to FBI agents, to give the government an affidavit signed under oath that contained numerous false statements, and ultimately to commit perjury before a federal grand jury, all for the purpose of distracting and impeding inquiries and investigations into their activities, including a federal grand jury investigation. The superseding indictment, which we emphasize is merely a charge for which guilt must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law, alleges that Mayor Cantrell and Mr. Vappie perpetuated their scheme both in the New Orleans area and during out-of-state trips. In both instances, Vappie's activities, while claiming to be on duty, were conspicuously different than any other member of the Executive Protection Unit. While in New Orleans, Cantrell and Vappie treated a city-owned apartment in the Pontalba building as their own personal shared residence and coordinated to spend time together there, engaging in personal activities, all while Vappie claimed to be on duty for the Executive Protection Unit and was being paid to do his actual job. The superseding indictment also alleges that Mayor Cantrell and Vappie arranged for Vappie to accompany Cantrell on at least 14 domestic and international trips to maximize their time together and to engage in personal activities. In their private text messages, Mayor Cantrell characterized her trips with Vappie as both, quote, times when we are truly alone, close quote, and as what, quote, spoils me the most. These trips included a trip to San Francisco, which Vappie and Cantrell decided to extend for an extra day so that they could visit a series of Napa Valley wineries. While Vappie was wine tasting on April the 9th, 2022, he claimed to be working and was in fact paid for working a 15-hour day. In August 2022, Cantrell said that she would, quote, unquote, make it happen, to have Vappie accompany her on a 3-day trip to Washington, D.C. for a 1-hour meeting. a trip that they both agreed they, quote-unquote, needed. Shortly after they returned, Vappie described the trip to Cantrell as, quote, another leg on our journey, close quote, as he declared his love for her and their physical relationship. In total, the city of New Orleans paid over $70,000 for Vappie's travel on these trips alone. When asked about her reason for bringing members of the Executive Protection Unit with her on out-of-state trips, a practice that Mayor Cantrell began about 5 months after Vappie joined the Executive Protection Unit, she justified it as a quote-unquote pivot due to COVID and a matter of safety, in quotes. At the same time, however, she continued to take out-of-state trips without any EPU protection or Executive Protective Unit protection. In fact, on the same day, she gave one such statement. She canceled a work trip to Miami and instead traveled alone by plane, then bus, then ferry to the island of Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts to spend some time with Vappie. Vappie was in Martha's Vineyard attending a conference paid for by the city of New Orleans related to his position on the Hanno Board of Commissioners, a position to which Cantrell had appointed him just months earlier. On other occasions, when Vappie was unavailable to accompany Cantrell on a trip, Cantrell chose not to take another member of the Executive Protection Unit with her. The superseding indictment alleges that both Vappie and Cantrell were aware that their conduct broke laws, criminal laws. For instance, in April 2022, an associate of Cantrell's explicitly told her in multiple text messages that spending public funds and using public resources for her personal relationship was illegal. When Vappie and Cantrell learned that the news media was investigating their time together in the Pentalba, they agreed amongst themselves to be, quote, unquote, straight and together. Days after the first news stories broke in November of 2022, Vappie conducted numerous online searches for New Orleans area attorneys who specialize in the practice of criminal law. And he researched WhatsApp's security features. But the defendant's wire fraud scheme nevertheless continued all the way until Vappie's retirement in June of 2024. As alleged in the superseding indictment, in July 2023, the grand jury issued subpoenas to both Vappie and Cantrell, compelling the production of records. The FBI also interviewed Vappie, and during the interview, Vappie lied about the nature and circumstances of his relationship with Cantrell. In response to the subpoena, Cantrell produced a selection of responsive records, but none of the over 15,000 WhatsApp messages that she had exchanged with Vappie. Cantrell also created an affidavit sworn under oath that in 2021 she had activated a feature on her phone that automatically deleted messages. In support of that statement in her affidavit, Cantrell submitted a screenshot of her iPhone showing WhatsApp messages were set to delete in 24 hours. But in fact, Cantrell did not turn on that feature until December the 26th, 2022, roughly 1 month after the news media began speculating on her conduct. Moreover, this automatic deletion or quote-unquote disappearing messages feature only applied to new messages. During roughly the same period, Cantrell also manually deleted thousands of her prior WhatsApp messages with Vappie. As alleged, even at the time that Cantrell responded to the grand jury subpoena, she still possessed more than 50 pictures, including screenshots of correspondence with Vappie that were responsive to the subpoena, but which she nevertheless concealed from the grand jury. On his own, Vappie conducted online searches concerning WhatsApp and its security level, and by which time several people had already warned Vappie and Cantrell that their conduct was illegal. The indictment further alleges that Vappie and Cantrell continued their pattern of obstruction through the rest of 2023 and 2024. This obstruction included improperly pressuring the interim superintendent of the New Orleans Police Department to overrule findings of an internal investigation into Vappie's conduct. When the interim superintendent did not heed that directive, Cantrell ordered the interim superintendent to nevertheless reassign Vappie back to her protection detail. Months later, in a meeting that Vappie attended, Mayor Cantrell informed the interim superintendent that the interim superintendent would be replaced. Similarly, when a private citizen took pictures of Mayor Cantrell and Vappie together in public, dining and consuming alcohol al fresco, while Vappie reported to be on duty, Cantrell filed a police report and sought a restraining order against that citizen. This indictment does not allege that a relationship constitutes a crime. It also does not allege that the criminal activity occurred on merely a handful of discrete days, or that the behavior was limited to a small series of discrete actions. Rather, it reflects the prosecution of two public officials alleged to have engaged in a years-long continuing fraud scheme that used public money for personal ends by exploiting their power and their authority. The superseding indictment alleges that they perpetuated that fraud scheme by taking steps to keep individuals silent, to deceive subordinates, and to obstruct investigations into their relationship, including one conducted by a federal grand jury. I'd like to make several things clear, if I may. First, my office remains steadfast in its commitment to rooting out public corruption in any form without fear or favor within the Eastern District of Louisiana. And by the term public corruption, I mean public officials exploiting their positions and their power for their own personal gain. Public officials should be in their jobs to serve the public and not themselves. To do otherwise is a breach of the trust that undermines the public's faith and trust in their own government. Second, this investigation remains ongoing, and I would encourage anyone with information to come forward and to do so quickly. They can do so by contacting the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or at fbi.gov, submit a tip. As I close today, I wish to emphasize that our investigations and our prosecutions go wherever the evidence takes us. Today's superseding indictment is the culmination of a lengthy and a deliberate investigative process in the ultimate pursuit of justice. No decision in this case was made lightly. I'd like to recognize the dedication at this time of the career prosecutors handling the case. To my right, Supervisory Assistant U.S. Attorney Jordan Ginsburg, who is Chief of the Public Corruption Unit, and AUSA Assistant U.S. Attorney Nicholas D. Moses of the Financial Crimes Unit and our Healthcare Fraud Coordinator. These men were ably assisted by numerous staff members of our office who dedicated their time and energy to assist them. I also specifically recognize the supervision of Tracy Knight, who is our criminal chief and has done a wonderful job in supervising this investigation and this prosecution. Individually and collectively, I am proud of this office's collaborative, professional, selfless, and unrelenting efforts. But such a case as this requires really tremendous partnership, and we have been blessed to have such. I want to thank the members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's New Orleans Field Office, led by Special Agent in Charge Jonathan Tapp, and his team members, Assistant Special Agent in Charge Percy Giles, and also ably assisted by Supervisory Special Agent Samira Maroney. The FBI spearheaded this investigation and have been with us on this matter from day one. The tireless work of FBI's agents, analysts, and support personnel deserves very special credit. I'd also like to recognize the indispensable contributions made by the Cybercrime Lab of the Department of Justice's Computer Crimes and Intellectual Property section. Finally, I'd like to thank and recognize the New Orleans Office of Inspector General and the Metropolitan Crime Commission for their great cooperation in this case and their dedication to identifying and reporting corrupt and unethical activity by public officials.